ready to go? All right, I think so.
You got the number.
All right, folks, good morning. Welcome to this morning's panel here with a really exciting, really terrific group of gentlemen. They'll all be introducing themselves coming up here in just a few minutes. Welcome, one and all. This is a conversation all about the convergence of two mighty $2 trillion industries colliding, if you will. Blockchain technology on the one hand, and the great North American transportation industry on the other. That feels so cool to say. We have really exciting news we'll get to in just a bit with regards to the TCS and INX teams. But first, I'm going to go down. I'll start with Todd Ziegler here, the CEO of TCS Blockchain, to introduce themselves and let you all know a little bit more about what brings us here to MATS this year.
Yeah, thanks, JD. My name's Todd Ziegler. I'm the CEO of TCS. Before I introduce myself, I want to thank JD for being here on behalf of FinTech TV. Very excited to have you guys covering what we feel is kind of a historic development, the convergence of these two industries. And thanks to MATS, obviously, for hosting this panel. Couldn't be more timely. I'm the CEO of TCS. Just very briefly, TCS is a blockchain as a service company. We're an alternative to factoring, and we're able to get carriers to cash in 1 to 2 business days, typically 90% cheaper than a factoring company would. We utilize blockchain rails to do that in lieu of banking rails, and we do not require exclusive contracts like factoring companies. So basically, if you sign up with TCS, you can settle one load, you can settle all your loads, you have complete flexibility. So it's a market difference from the industry standard that most people recognize.
Hello, my name is Chris Polk. I'm the Director of Operations for Blue Ribbon Logistical Solutions. We're a small fleet of trucks leased to Landstar that provides an opportunity for employee drivers to come and drive our trucks and let us teach them business. I failed as an owner-operator, and at some point I came to the realization that the only person to blame for that failure was the guy that I shaved with and I looked in the mirror. And so we give this opportunity to people to learn how to run a successful business with as little risk possible. And risk is a big part of this conversation when it comes to blockchain. And I've been a blockchain fan for about 10 years, and I've kind of been waiting for this to come along because this technology provides the ability for us to reduce the amount of fraud and waste in this industry, and then the settlement is just the cherry on the top. So Todd and I kind of bumped into each other a couple years ago, and we started this conversation. We're big on TikTok and YouTube. Todd and I did a conversation 18 months ago or so. But I am here to kind of represent the truck side of this because I'm leased to Landstar. That's part of my risk strategy and getting paid strategy, because it is so difficult and dangerous in this industry right now to actually get all of the money.
Hi everybody, my name is Michael Morrow. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at INX. INX is the crypto exchange platform that is currently starting to trade TCS tokens. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's my first time here, not just in Louisville, but any trucking conference whatsoever. So this whole experience has been awesome for me. And I know we have a whole hour to kind of dive into what we're here to kind of chat about, but just wanted to say thanks and extend gratitude and kind of share my excitement to be on the panel with all of you.
Hi, my name is Mike Beatty, Golden Network. I am also a first-time truck conference person, so this is really different. Usually I'm a developer in other places. Golden Network is more or less QuickBooks for blockchain. It's a P2P account, so true you to me account, and it's the infrastructure that Todd is using to sell invoices, that INX is using to send or to settle TCS tokens. So really excited to be here. This is the first kind of bigger business application that is around. Most people on blockchains are trading things, like in pairs. So this is real business happening, and I can't be more excited to get started. We got our first invoice yesterday. That was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. First invoice settled yesterday. We'll talk about that in just a second. But first of all, Michael said it's your first kind of trucking, your first MATS, first trucking conference. I'm with you. It's my first one. Anyone else first time here at MATS? Oh, that's more hands than I thought. All right, well, welcome to all of you here. So before we kind of get into the exciting news of yesterday and kind of break down the issues writ large, I first kind of want to establish the main problems, the pain points. And Todd, I'll start with you. How you see TCS kind of fitting into the solution, and just what are those pain points you see in the industry from traditional factoring for freight settlements?
Right, and I appreciate that question. I need to start with a caveat that there's a lot of tech that's come into the transportation industry over the course of the last decade or two. A lot of it I would probably refer to as faux tech, right? You got tech people coming into the industry saying, we know better, we can solve all these problems with tech. I'm a former freight brokerage owner. I've been working in the industry for 10 years, and that's how I encountered the problem that TCS solves. And really what it is it's a payments problem, right? Anybody that's familiar with trucking or brokerage understands that most shippers are paying on 30 to 180 day terms, right? It's a nightmare. So if you can't wait 30 to 180 days to get paid on an invoice, that means you typically have to sell your accounts receivable to a factoring company, wherein you're typically waiting 10 days to get paid, and you're often paying 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5% just to get paid on an invoice in a couple days. I talk to a lot of carriers, I talk to a lot of brokerages, and when I hear 3%, that sounds like 3% to most people. To me, that's a 36% annualized interest rate, right? That's 3% a month. That's a hard money loan. That's a payday loan, right? And if you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at, you know, what a freight invoice is, it's a commercial paper asset. Right, so if I have an invoice from a Fortune 500 shipper, that's a AAA rated commercial paper asset that I am paying at 3%, a 36% hard money loan rate for somebody to cash me out of. That's insane. That's absolutely insane, but that's industry standard, and that's all we've had until a better solution came along. That solution is provided on blockchain rails, and it's provided by TCS Blockchain. Blockchain is what enables us to settle carriers faster and cheaper without sticking them with these usurious rates. So that's the larger problem, and it really is a payments problem at the end of the day. But in many instances, you know, we're able to save carriers, you know, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars every year on each unit, settling freight invoices on blockchain rails.
And I'll be honest, when Todd first told me that 3% figure, I also kind of assumed it was annualized, but I mean, open question for all you guys, is that bit of miscommunication pretty popular? Do you have a lot of kind of aha moments from people who say, wait a minute, I thought that was over the full year. What do you mean that's month over month?
Yeah, no, that's...
Go for it.
Well, most drivers, the barrier of entry into trucking is low, and when you start talking about financial instruments, their eyes glaze over and they don't understand it. Even if you say, hey, I know it says 3% on the contract that you didn't read that you signed, but when you try to explain that annualized interest rate, their eyes glaze over, because that's not a part of the kind of the American education system to teach those kinds of things. And so, well, it says 3%, I'm getting my money today, I'll move on.
My question is for Chris here, longtime owner-operator. I got to know Chris a little bit last night, so I'm going to ask him a question very directly, if you don't mind. What's the biggest pain in the ass? I'm just going to put it out there the way that I know you talk. Biggest pain in the ass about how you see all these settlements work and those pain points from how you've been situated in this industry over your many years.
Well, the reason that I chose to partner with a large carrier, because there's a big thing in, oh, you let Landstar take all your money. Well, number one, it's not my money, it's Landstar's money. Landstar pays the truck, they pay the trailer, they pay the agent, okay? And I exchange risk protection, right? My cargo liability cost is $0. That's kind of hard to beat, okay? But let's roll back to why we buy trucks in the first place. Why I wanted to buy a truck and become an owner-operator. I wanted to escape the ceiling. I could work as hard as anybody else could work at a company as a truck driver, but there is a limit to the amount of money that I can make. I looked around the market and said, well, what if I could do a better job than the next guy? And the only way that I can do that and achieve that level of freedom and autonomy is to buy a truck. Well, the thing that you don't understand when you make that choice to buy a truck and go into business is that amount of risk that you're taking on And someone may pay you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but you walk away with very little because you either A, don't understand the risk, you don't understand the cost associated, and then you say, okay, well, I don't want to lease to a carrier. I want to be fully and truly independent, which I applaud you for that notion, because that is the ultimate level of freedom that you can achieve in America. It's the American dream to be a fully independent person, okay? But you end up dealing with people that want to pay you 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 days later. Well, who in here has the amount of cash to pay all your fuel, to pay your driver, to pay your insurance, to pay everything that you've got to pay, and survive long enough to be paid on that invoice? And then somebody comes along and say, hey, well, man, we're still 3%. I'll pay you today. Well, that sounds like a great deal. Even carriers will do quick pay for 2 or 3%. But what you're not thinking about is all the money that you're losing, and their buildings get taller and taller and taller and taller, and your bank account gets lower and lower and lower and lower. So it was a no-brainer for me as a small 1-truck operation that grew to a 10-truck operation to exchange some value for risk protection, because I can maximize my dollars and I can lower my expenses. So I don't want us to ever forget that the reason we bought trucks in the first place was to make money, right? It shouldn't be a hobby. It should be a business. And businesses increase revenue and minimize expenses, and whoever is the best at that makes the most amount of money. And we have allowed these factoring companies to come in and provide a service. There's no question about that, it's a service. But how much are you giving away, and what is your alternative? Well, right now, or up until yesterday, your alternative was to wait. Just have the cash, be able to survive until you can begin processing those invoices, and hope that enough of those invoices pay over time that you don't get stiffed for a load, and you get to truly keep 100% of the money. Well, now exists an option for us that is outside of factoring, where we can be paid in a couple of days for as little as 1%, or even maybe nothing.
One more question here for Todd and Chris. What's one thing about working the traditional factoring model that you wish more people understood?
I think it's cost of capital, right? And Chris discussed that a little bit, that 2% isn't 2%. 2% is a 24% interest rate, right? And in terms of finance, looking across the scope of finance in every country and in every industry, it's a very, very high cost of capital. It's extremely burdensome. I do want to quickly just share with everybody the world's first freight invoice settlement on INX was yesterday. We're very excited to have the token listed over there. INX is a fully, and Michael does a better job talking about this than I do, but INX is a fully regulated and licensed U.S. exchange. But TCS has multiple users on the platform. We've been settling carriers since last summer, and we were the world's first company to settle a freight invoice on chain back in late 2022. So we have been at this for a couple years. We've perfected the process, but we're here at MATS this weekend to kind of announce to the world that now's the time for this to scale. Now's the time for the solution to become a true alternative to mainstream factoring.
Good time for a launch.
Yeah.
We're here at MATS, absolutely. Michael, talk to us more about Michael Morrow, a bit more about the partnership with INX, and if you could, maybe a bit of an introduction of what INX really specializes in for anyone in the audience who might be a bit unfamiliar.
Sure, happy to do it. So how many of you in the audience have ever bought Bitcoin, Ethereum, any cryptocurrency? That is a much higher percentage of the audience than I would say. So, awesome. And for those of you who are certainly kind of new to the space, I think a project like TCS might certainly make sense as an entry point into the crypto universe. So I've been in the crypto space now for 10 years, 11 years, which is forever, kind of given how long Bitcoin itself has been around. And I think that one of the criticisms of the space, and to be honest, even though I've been in it forever, I think the criticism is fair, is like kind of the purpose of so many of these token projects. I think once Bitcoin and Ethereum took off as an investable asset, I think there were so many Me Too companies, Me Too coins that popped up that actually had no true value, no new project, no new revenue model kind of sitting kind of behind them. And all they thought was kind of a get-rich-quick type of scheme, which, frankly, as markets should, they would collapse in value, right? They might do well for a certain period of time, and then you see that 80, 90% plus correction, and people end up losing a ton of money. And so I think the problem in the cryptocurrency largely has always been, okay, but what problems are you solving? What's the purpose of these coins? And I think the entire space, crypto, non-crypto, TradFi, traditional finance folks, been wondering is, let's come up with solutions to real-world problems. And if blockchain can help solve them, or to kind of ease the pain of being in that space, then those are the projects that are certainly worth getting behind. And so I first kind of met Todd just maybe about a month and a half ago. INX and TCS themselves have been talking for some time now to try to figure out how the token that is on chain helps to provide faster and more efficient settlement. What we announced yesterday was that the TCS token, which is used as kind of a settlement mechanism to sell the invoices, we're trading on INX for the first time. So that means that a truck driver, owner-operator, were able to convert their invoice into TCS tokens, and those TCS tokens were traded on the exchange that I represent called INX, and then exchange them for $4, for US dollars right there on the exchange, and then those dollars can be withdrawn to their bank accounts. And to be able to do that in a much shorter time frame, and a much closer value to the face value of the invoice than is typically done kind of in the factoring space. So incredibly excited to not just kind of support Todd, but to be able to talk about real-world use cases, solving real-world problems, knowing that the total addressable market here is tremendous. And that we have, this is the first solution that I'm certainly aware of that kind of addresses this problem head on, and I think it's fantastic, and we're thrilled to partner with TCS Blockchain to get this done.
All right, and congratulations on a huge day yesterday, no doubt, and hopefully many more to come. Michael, Revy, down to you at the end. You come at this a bit more through the institutional, your background's a little bit different maybe than anyone else up here, but I wonder what draws you to this space in this particular moment, and how does Bulla fit into that?
Well, the moment Todd told me it was 3% per month, 36% per annum, I realized there's a problem, and it's called price discovery. And how do you get rid of, or how do you improve price discovery? You have transparency. What's the most transparent thing that I can think of? Blockchains. If we get all of your invoices on a blockchain, and people can see that they financed a TCS token, and then people will see what kinds of yields are in this business, and the price discovery, I think yields will eventually go down. We'll solve this 3% problem. But that's, to me, the big aha, because before I was trading on markets, I was a bond trader. We needed information. Information is what prices does. So if we can get more information on the blockchain, the other great thing about blockchains is they're scalable, they're very cheap, they're super transparent. And when I hear it takes 3 days to get your money, if I send you a stable token, it takes you block time. And it doesn't cost, it costs now, not a lot of money. So blockchain technology is a great application for this particular business because you can do a lot of small invoices. It doesn't cost you a lot more money. It's very scalable. You can get it all transparently. You can see, where are the invoices, and are they really backed? Does TCS really have a backing? And then the cost, the price discovery.
Yeah. Michael, I'll stay with you for the next one. Paint the picture of how transparent that element of a blockchain is in terms of the information that's there and how you're using it for auditing, for tax, for compliance purposes, because we'll talk a little bit more about predatory financing and the waste in just a bit, but in terms of just how the blockchain itself has information that anyone can see in a transparent way, because it seems like we have a pretty knowledgeable audience, but I know there's certainly people who have heard a lot about it and maybe haven't gotten to experience it themselves.
Yeah, a blockchain is a public database, essentially. Anybody can look at it. And the reason we use it is to put things in a public way. You don't put everything on a blockchain. Not everything belongs on the blockchain. But certainly if you're making payments or if you're making credit claims, which is what Bulla does. Oh, let me back up a little bit. Bitcoins or like hard money. So you're a cash only economy. That's very difficult in business. So the reason so many people are tokenizing things is because we need another element to do business, and that would be tokenizing an invoice and putting it on a blockchain. And if you do that, all the invoices, all that token is saying, well, Todd owes me $100, and Todd's wallet is signed on it, so I know it has some legitimacy. Once you have that mechanism, then you can start to mirror what the business processes we already have in real business. So that's the difference. Once you get those on a blockchain, then I can see all the invoices. I can see how much Todd has, if he's paid me back at all, right? Because you can see it's still open, unpaid, or if it is paid. So over time, you build histories, you build trust, and the other thing about blockchains is nobody can go in and erase anything. It's immutable. So the moment you put it on a blockchain, you don't get the call, well, we lost your data, we don't know where it is. I'll give you another dumb example. When I traded bonds, we would do an asset swap. We file the ISDA, which is a document, and then somebody would leave and we'd lose all that data. And we had no idea what kind of position, what sort of exposures we had. This can't happen with a blockchain. I cannot hide the keys. In the pool that we set up, you can see everything that's happening. You can see the state of each invoice, whether it's been paid on time, what the notional amount was, how much was it factored, was it financed for, everything. So it's a transformation. It's going to make pricing, discovery, drive the business. I think we're going to make people's margins much better.
And for Todd and Michael Moore, could you guys talk a little bit more about the journey between TCS and INX to get to where you arrived yesterday, this big successful first settlement? Because over the years, even given the skepticism from many in the general blockchain crypto space, I'd imagine there's more than a few headwinds you all had to battle to get to where you are now.
Yeah, a lot of headwinds, but I want to take this back to the value proposition for the transportation industry, right? I mean, really what this is it's an opportunity, and just to kind of clarify, opening up an account or a wallet on an exchange like INX is the equivalent of opening a business checking account, right? That's effectively what it is, right? It's opening an account to settle accounts receivable. So, the value proposition is 1% or less. As this scales, we'll be able to lower that cost of capital even further. So anybody that's paying 3%, right, on an invoice, we're cutting their cost of capital by 66% a year, right? If you're running 10 trucks, if you're running one truck, that's a massive savings. That's like a vacation, right? Reducing your cost of capital by 66%. And also by not having exclusive contracts and allowing carriers and brokers to have complete flexibility in the invoices that they decide to settle on chain versus the invoices that they want to settle directly with their shippers, because maybe they've got some shippers that pay really well, like net 30, you don't have to chase them down, everything's good. You shouldn't have to outsource that invoice to another company if you don't want to. If you're in a contract with a factoring company, you're stuck. It's an all or nothing proposition. So I don't need to tell many people in this room or in this industry, that trucking and transportation is $2 trillion. The largest incumbent factoring company in the US manages about $60 billion a year in commercial paper assets. I won't name them, but I'll tell you I'm a former customer of theirs, and their service is slow, it's antiquated, it's expensive, and the experience sucks. It absolutely sucks. That's my background, right? That's kind of how we got here. So not only is there just a massive opportunity for the transportation industry, but if all of these flows start moving on chain, you're talking about, at scale, billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and obviously that's meaningful for both industries.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's no doubt so many members of the audience are familiar of what that relationship looks like using these factoring companies and a lot of the pain points inherent. Michael, I'm hoping you could walk us through the INX component. Todd set it up and said, it's kind of comparable to setting up maybe a business checking account we're all familiar with, but one of my favorite subreddits is called Explain Like I'm 5. When I don't understand something and I want to explain like a really simple way, can you try and explain like I'm 5? I want to set up an account at INX. What do I do?
Well, first of all, before we kind of get into the INX specific, we'll chat a little bit about tailwinds versus headwinds.
Of course.
That we've kind of got us all to this point. So the previous presidential administration and certainly the regime at the Securities and Exchange Commission was anything but crypto friendly. I think they were certainly openly hostile to the industry and decided to sort of govern through regulation and enforcement rather than rulemaking and speaking to the industry. Certainly since inauguration and the new folks at the SEC, certainly there's a lot more hope and optimism that the crypto industry moving forward will be treated fairly and is seen as a growth driver for the years to come, rather than something that inhibits growth, something that is bad, certainly for the financial system, and that it could be a difference maker, not just kind of improve margins, but for job growth, creation, and for new business models to ultimately emerge. So I think this, everything that we're kind of chatting about here today, I'm not sure it would have been possible under the previous SEC regime. So I think I don't want to kind of discount all of kind of the macroeconomic things that have sort of lined up here for this project to be able to launch and kind of get to where we are today. And certainly incredibly hopeful and optimistic for the years to come with the start that we're certainly off to. As far as INX goes, so there is the customer onboarding part, and it is similar to opening up kind of a business checking account, right? I think that is a good analogy in terms of getting signed up, providing your ID and some personal information to run typical anti-money laundering background checks that we're required to do by law. But once that process is done, and that process can take even just a few hours, to kind of get that done from end to end. And I would imagine that even if it required more documentation, it doesn't take longer than like 24 hours to ultimately kind of get that done. Once that's done, then you already have an account at INX plus a wallet at INX. So there is no separate need to create a separate wallet that is part of your account. That wallet could be funded with all of the assets that INX provides. So you could come to INX, you can send in dollars and buy Bitcoin, you can send in dollars to buy Ethereum, or you can send in dollars now to buy TCS tokens that are now trading as any other crypto asset on the INX platform. Now, for the drivers, they would go through the BOLA process first in terms of tokenizing of the invoice. So the invoice that they have, that they are owed money from, they would need to put that on chain. And then in exchange for that invoice, you receive TCS tokens. And your wallet on INX will get funded with TCS tokens that matches the value of your invoice.
Right.
Now, then you can put a sell order on for the TCS tokens through INX and sell that for US dollars. And then that dollars, then you can link your bank account to your INX account and then withdraw that balance. Or, for those of you who are crypto friendly, you can take those US dollar balances and then convert that to USDC or some other US dollar stablecoin and then withdraw that to any crypto wallet of your choosing that happens to support that stablecoin. So, just kind of consider INX as the kind of liquidation platform for you to convert your TCS tokens into US dollars and to be able to do that pretty much instantly on the INX platform.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that briefly. Everything Michael said is 100% correct. But if you're a trucking company or a brokerage, this is really simple. You set up an account at INX just like a business checking account. You email the invoice to TCS just like you would send it to a factoring company. We're going to tell you that we're buying that invoice in 1 to 2 business days. Typically 1 business day if it's a shipper or debtor that we've already worked with you on, right? It's somebody that's already on the platform whose receivable we've purchased, okay? You're going to have TCS tokens directly deposited into your wallet at INX, and in 2 clicks, you're back into US dollars, if that's what you want to do. It's really that simple. Once the account is set up, you send an invoice, the tokens get directly deposited, 2 clicks, you're back into US dollars. The TCS business and revenue model is built to meet the need of transportation companies. Our expectation is that you need to get to cash, right? You're running a trucking company, you're running a brokerage, it costs $1,500, I think, in most states to fill up a truck with diesel. Right? So the entire business and revenue model is predicated on getting transportation companies to cash faster and cheaper than a factoring company would. I also kind of buried the lead on your question. So on the regulatory front, a couple weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., because the White House invited TCS to show up and talk about this use case. Okay? And I would love to tell you that that was about TCS blockchain, but really it was about the problem and the solution. The current administration, and I'm taking politics out of this, I'm a libertarian anyway, right? Take the politics out of it. The current administration has a real focus right now. They have a mandate to focus on 3 core things: reducing cost of goods for consumers, reducing cost of capital for businesses, and reducing cost of housing. Okay, they are committed to those 3 tenets right now. And the reason that they wanted to talk to us is because we are reducing the cost of capital for transportation and trucking companies. And that is meaningful, not just to small business. I mean, they understand very, very well that logistics and transportation companies are the backbone of the entire U.S. economy. I think you've probably all heard the same statistic. It's like, if the trucks stopped running, 3 days later the grocery stores would be empty, right? That's how vital all of you are to the entire U.S. economy and supply chain. So they are very committed to trying to help reduce this cost of capital problem in the industry. And I think it really demonstrates the sea change that we've seen, right? We've gone from an environment that was very adverse to innovation, to an environment that is very supportive of innovation, and that was a great thing to see.
Yeah, I was wondering if we get any SEC Gary Gensler references while we were up here. Of course we would at some point. We'll get back to crypto in just a second, but meeting Chris last night was really eye-opening for me, and I think his personal experience, his personal journey is probably what so many of you in the audience could probably maybe more directly relate to. And Chris, to any degree that you're comfortable, tell us about that personal journey that led you now to be as passionate as you are about these forward-thinking solutions, especially for invoice settlements.
So like I said before, the whole point of buying a truck was to achieve a level of freedom that I could not achieve as an employee. And then I did it wrong, okay? Now, there was no one really to tell me. I just kind of had to figure it out on my own, as we all do. If you've ever bought a truck, you found out, right? You found out at some point, holy crap, this is hard. Well, I did not make the right decisions. I did not run the business well, and I failed. And I was extended a hand by a man named Larry Long, who was a 50-year entrepreneur who had trucks, and he recognized my admission that I was the problem, and he gave me that opportunity, and he put me in a truck. I turned my life around, kept my house from getting foreclosed on, because that was all coming. The foreclosure was coming, the repossession was coming, probably divorce. That was looking pretty awful too. And then together we realized that we had this heart to teach and say, okay, well, he did it all wrong, and here's why. Let's give you an opportunity to do it right. So I have some very passionate conversations with the people in our program. And a very high volume last week, I had to look at one of my guys and say, they were coming to get my house. The house that my children sleep in was about to be taken away, and it was because of me. I couldn't blame the brokers. I couldn't blame Landstar. I couldn't blame the president. I couldn't blame Congress. It was me. So if you want to succeed as an owner-operator, independent, leased, however, you're going to have to put in the work, and you're going to have to figure it out, because I can promise you, if you do it wrong, it will destroy your life. This industry is amazing. I mean, I get angry when people talk down about how terrible the industry is. I told someone last night, if you could see the trucking industry through my eyes, you would not so confidently press that button on Amazon for 2-day delivery. Because it's a miracle from heaven that anything gets delivered. Right? It just really is. This industry's a mess. There's no question about that. We've got legitimate problems that need legitimate solutions. But it's really because of truck drivers. Right? It really is down at the very root level. It's because of truck drivers that things happen. And I don't want us to ever forget, or maybe just, I want us to learn, 93% of the trucks on the road are run by companies with 5 trucks or less. Swift, Schneider, J.B. Hunt, U.S. Express, they are not the rule, they are the exception. We cannot look at their business model and say that's how you run a truck, because they're 7%. They're tiny, they're almost insignificant. 93%, I don't know how much percentage of that 93% are single truck owner operators, but y'all, it's a big number. That the American economy literally runs on the back of individual small businesses. And individual small businesses are being destroyed and wiped out because of cost of capital. The ability to go do the work and get paid and be able to fill the tank up to do the next one, that cost of capital, and again, it's why I chose to lease the Landstar rather than to try to do it on my own, because I see the landscape corpses of dead trucking companies that are laying all around us, especially since 2021. And it's all because of cost of capital. And if we can fix cost of capital, and we can also fix the identity problems, the double brokering, the chameleon carriers. We've all seen the video in the last week of the guy ripping the DOT number off and putting another one on the side of his truck. Well, that's got to stop. But it's not going to be a top-down White House decision. It's going to be fixed on the bottom. We're going to have to fix a lot of our own problems. And when single truck owner operators are the majority of the trucks, we're going to have to come up with a solution to fix a couple of these big problems, cost of capital and identity, and that can be done with this technology.
Yeah, and thank you for being willing to share so much of that. Yeah, absolutely. Let's clap that. Big time. Chris, you're the man. So an open question for all 4 panelists, although we do have a pretty crypto-savvy crowd, which was awesome. I agree, there's more hands than I thought. I'm hoping any of you, or all of you, are willing to address in one way or another any kind of concerns that the average person may have out there who sees the headlines on cryptocurrency and blockchain, maybe thinks, God, it sounds like a really complicated space on the one hand, or on the other hand, well, it's already been in the news for so long, maybe I kind of missed the boat, maybe I kind of missed the action and I'm behind on the curve. What would you all say to encourage anyone in that circumstance to continue to learn more?
Turn off the television.
Absolutely.
I wanted to say this particular application is about stable tokens. So we're talking about sending dollars around, not Bitcoins or Ethereum. So you're already insulated. If all you want to do is improve your method of business, and improve your margins and your speed and transparency and then this is a great solution because you know exposure to blockchain, to Bitcoin. On the other hand, once you have that USD at INX, it's going to be awfully tempting to buy a little Bitcoin because it's right there next to it.
Yeah, I'll just add. Again, the TCS business and revenue model was built to service the need of transportation companies, right? And that need is to get to liquidity, to get to cash, fast and cheap. So TCS basically when TCS directly deposits tokens into your wallet, okay, we're guaranteeing that liquidity. If you want to immediately sell the token, or let's say you want to sell it tomorrow or you want to sell it later that week, we're guaranteeing that you can get US dollars, dollar per dollar, for that transaction on chain. So if you don't want to deal with volatility, if you don't want to deal with a lot of kind of the hallmarks of other digital assets and cryptos, you don't have to. This is a business application, right? This is not an investment application. This is not a speculative application. To Mike's point, Once the value of your invoice, of your revenue is on chain, if you want to engage in some speculative activity, if you want to buy some Bitcoin, if you want to buy some Ethereum, you can do that. But if what you really need is to move cash back into your business checking account, fill up the truck, and get to the next load, that's what our platform is built to do.
Amazing.
I'll add that INX is certainly here to support the user through their journey. So to the extent that anyone onboards into INX and is like, okay, where do I go, what do I do? There are human beings that are available to answer your questions and to be able to walk you through the entire process. And if for some reason INX is being slow to respond, Todd knows how to get a hold of me. And we'll help you, certainly on a one-by-one to kind of help you do that. To make this as seamless and as easy and less daunting, I promise it was a lot easier than what crypto and whatnot might suggest.
Absolutely. Go for it.
I just want to add one more thing. I hope people know what a staples up is. You guys know what that is. So it's just supposed to be $8. And if you're running a business, at the end of the day, what do you pay taxes in? Dollars. And you really want to stay in staples up, at least if you're doing it for business. Yeah, the only risk, or the big risk, would be a DPEG on a staples up. So you're taking the USD, USDT. That's, you got to take risks in life.
Sure. Sure. Michael, actually, I'll stay with you for the next one, because you and I talked a bit about this last night. Paint the picture for how bad you see the world of predatory financing, the overall waste conversation, and how you feel like this is a more unique and direct solution to those pain points.
Yeah, the more lights, the better. If you can see that you are a good truck driver, you're a good credit, but you're paying 36%. That doesn't make any sense. If other people know that there's an available yield, 36% on a AAA, that's going to change overnight. And I've seen it before. When I was trading, we would have, smaller issues. We would have liquidity problems. Wherever there's a liquidity problem, there's opportunity for predatory things to happen. And that's what we're trying to get away from. If we can get enough volume going through this TCS token, going through the liquidity pool, by the way, you can look at the liquidity pool on the network to see the actual invoices and what their state is. The more information you get out, the more flow, then you're going to say to yourself, well, this is an 11% return with no defaults, 30 days. That's crazy. I should put some, instead of buying Bitcoin, I should put some money to work there. So that's, I think the predatory comes into play wherever there's liquidity that is problematic, and whenever there is opacity of data, where you can't get the data, or where it's siloed, or somebody owns it, and won't get it out to the public. And blockchains are public.
Yeah. And another, yeah, go ahead. Go for it, Chris.
I want to say, look, I graduated from a government school in West Virginia 30 years ago. I don't have any college education. I don't have any formal training. I do have some good life from the School of Hard Knowledge. You're all smart enough to figure this out, okay? You have to be curious, right? You have to kind of think through it, because they use a lot of terms up here very freely that I have heard them use over the last couple months, and I've kind of figured out. But there is no basic financial literacy training in American government schools. It does not exist. So if you want to know what money is, what currency is, what an exchange is, what liquidity is, and a lot of these terms that they've used up here today, you can figure it out, but you have to be curious enough to go, okay, there's information on this thing, now I can use discernment. Is this a sales pitch? Because this is not the hot Tua coin that we're talking about. This is not a pump and dump scheme, to try to make one guy rich and can fly off to the Bahamas to live on his riches forever. This is about solving a problem, and it's a problem that we first have to fully understand as consumers and as business operators. And you're all smart enough to figure it out, but you may have to take some time, watch some YouTube videos, and just go out and see where it takes you. But this is a real solution to a real problem that we all face every day, and we cannot continue to ignore it.
I'm glad, yeah, YouTube is the world's classroom, because if you have the question, there's somewhat other human being has had that question, and you'd be surprised the specificity with which you're like, no one's ever thought of this to give an answer to. No, it's probably on YouTube, trust me. Another open question for you all, there's just no way that the average American can comprehend or understand the thousands, tens of thousands, arguably, of American transportation companies that have failed in just the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And I wonder, as you're all positioned and we're talking about this forward-thinking payments and settlement solution, do any of you feel as if, maybe some of those companies, some of those names, those hardworking Americans could have had a bit of a different outcome had this invoice settlement issue been a bit more streamlined?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like the trucking going up and going down and going up and going down, that's not strength, right? We shouldn't be shocked that we had the highest highs in the history of the industry. I mean, guys, I had an $8,000, well, actually I started in 2020 with a $6,250 a week revenue goal. We finished 2020 with a $10,000 revenue goal, and we were blasting through it every single week because the market was insane. And when that happens, everybody and their brother goes and buys a truck, and they go get into seats, and the regulatory agency, they're handing out MCs like OxyContin. They're just, oh yeah, you want an MC? You want an MC? Sure, here, sign up here. And then the market gets so crazy. Well, the balloon that gets filled up always pops, right? And so on our podcast in 2021, I went back and found it, and we're going, this cannot survive. This will not sustain. Please be ready. It's going to rain. And they all looked at us like we were crazy. And at the end of the 21, the bottom fell out of the market. And they're going, well, I can't survive anymore. Yeah, this is true. It's not that I don't empathize. It's not that I don't feel sorry for you. But what goes up must come down. And when it goes down, it's ugly and it hurts. So, let's see to the question. Could a lot of these people survive? Yes. But let me give you a quick example. We had a young man come to us whose dad had given him some capital. He bought 4 trucks and 4 trailers. And of course in 2021, you could fall off a log and make money. And they did well. Well, then they made a mistake. They didn't put the right name on the insurance policy. They had a wreck. The insurance company won't pay for the loss. So there's a truck and a trailer down. Then another one wrecks. There's another truck and a trailer down. Then one blows up. He's got 1 truck left, right? And he comes to me and he says, can you do something with this truck? And I'm like, yeah, we put it in the fleet. We put a driver in it. Still have it today. It just crossed over 1 million miles. But even then, he got to a point where it needed a $7,000 clutch. And he was like, I'm done. I'm broke. I can't do this anymore, right? I found a guy to buy the truck. We kept it in the fleet. So there's a great number of those that were going to fail anyway. They just came in at a time when it was too easy to make money, and their fundamentals of how their business was set up was never going to survive a normal rate market. Y'all, we're in a normal rate market right now. I know it hurt. I know it sounds bad, but this is a normal rate market. I mean, it's not that bad. It feels that way, but it's really, the rate market it's not terrible. It could be worse. So, but for people that have sustained through, I think there's probably a good chunk of those that could have survived, but they had to have that cash clear, right? And they got it, and they've signed their lives away to these companies. And then, like Todd said, trying to get out of these deals is a whole lot harder to get into.
Yeah, just to put a number on it for anybody that doesn't know, I think the last number that I saw was about 50,000 trucking and transportation companies failed over the last 2 to 3 years. And I agree with Chris, there's always going to be a boom-bust cycle component in transportation. Anybody that's in the industry knows that. Running a brokerage for multiple years, we saw the boom-bust cycles. This one was particularly egregious for 2 reasons. The first is the cost of capital issue, which we've been talking about here today. The second one is you had our friends in Washington just printing money, right? And that basically sustained really the boom and the bust, right? So this one has been particularly challenging on the industry. I think it's the worst the industry has seen in recorded history. But the good news is every market, every industry, every sector is always in cycle, right? And I know there's been a lot of calls for the bottom. I don't know exactly where that is, but what we're seeing right now in terms of the repatriation of manufacturing, a lot of the bad stuff has kind of been flushed out at this point. I would certainly like to believe that we're on an upward swing, that we're moving back towards the top of a very favorable environment for trucking and transportation. But in whatever environment you're in, if you can lower your cost of capital, that's going to improve your ability to get oxygen, right? And that's true for any industry and any sector. And that's why tech solutions that can help mitigate those problems are so important.
Awesome.
So obviously, I'm entirely ignorant of trucking economics and trends and whatnot, but it sounds like you guys are definitely used to the volatility. I think crypto markets are certainly known for volatility, but the peaks and valleys and the highs and lows, as I'm listening to Chris and Todd speak over here, I'm like, wow, this is kind of similar to what we see kind of in the crypto market for sure. So I think the booms and busts and the cycles are certainly trends that are obviously going to carry over. But to their point, if you can keep 20 to 30 more cents on every dollar that you earn over the course of a year and get to pocket that instead of giving that away to factoring companies with no exclusivity, with no commitment to Todd, you can just do one invoice and not do it again. Like, it's one of these things where, to echo a certain point from Chris earlier, like, we think we've come up with a solution. Right? But the customer base has to agree that this is a better way to do it. And so that a lot of will this be successful, will this challenge the existing business model, all of that stuff is kind of up to all of you, right? To decide whether or not trying something new, trying something different, maybe it's a little bit different than uncomfortable at first, but that desire for change has to actually happen with the potential users and customers of TCS blockchain. And that'll provide the feedback as to whether or not this is actually a disruptive new thing that we all think it could be.
Yeah, and I just, we could spend all day talking about, monetary policy and economic stuff, but I do want to zoom out for just a second because a lot of people don't think about what they're transacting in now. What's the current model, right? We're transacting in dollars. What is a dollar? A dollar is a piece of paper that's backed by nothing, that's originated as a debt instrument, right? So that's what we're all doing now. We're trading debt instruments that are not backed by gold or any kind of asset or really anything at all, and it's just because we all agree that we're willing to trade this instrument. So I'm not taking a shot at dollars, right? I actually think what is happening right now in terms of stable coins moving around the world, let me just give you a quick example. If I'm in Venezuela or I'm in a second or third world country, I want to get into dollars right now, right? I do not want to, I don't even know what the name of the Venezuelan currency is, but I guarantee you the inflation is crazy. I want to get into dollars right now. Not that somebody in Venezuela could have an account at INX, but they could have an account somewhere else and they can immediately move their Venezuelan dollars into a stable coin, right? And all of a sudden they have the safety and security of being in the dollar, right? That's a really good thing. So I'm not up here beating up US treasuries or dollars or anything like that. But if you just kind of take a minute to think about what we're doing now, it kind of doesn't seem all that great. And maybe it makes sense to crack the door to some alternatives that can mitigate the cost of capital for your business.
Yeah, and Michael Revy, if I can, given the fact that at least we did briefly mention monetary policy, quantitative easing, obviously the Fed injecting all that cash into the system a few years ago, when you look at all of those headlines on Wall Street from your old days there that led to so much volatility, does that kind of underscore your own commitment to the space that you're in right now with BOLA?
Yes, 100%. I think people want to be able to use a single token. First of all, you get rid of your banking risk. A lot of banks have a lot of risk because of all this money printing.
Yeah.
So just owning a stable token in your own wallet, if JP Morgan were to go online tomorrow, you would still have your one USDC in your wallet. So that's A. You can start to think about your counterparty risk with banks because of all the printing that's been going on.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing I wanted to mention too, is very curious to me, the trucking industry, the strength of blockchains is what? It's decentralization. But the blockchain itself is a weirdly centralizing source of truth. So I always think there's a great parallel between trucking and blockchains, because people are using, our economy is that flexible to deliver to Amazon no matter what, because it's decentralized. And the same idea with blockchains, decentralization has a lot of flexibility so it can survive. So like you still have your cable television, JP Morgan might be gone, but at least it's still on the blockchain. And also, over time, I think people will start to, they know they have to pay taxes on the coin of the realm, so they're going to need dollars. But if they're saving, they're probably, they want to buy assets.
Sure.
Some of those could be big.
Yeah, we've got just a few minutes left, but I do have to mention Todd is easily one of the coolest people I know, because I feel like in the span of a week, he somehow was at the White House and also on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. That's awesome. Todd, Michael, you guys were down there for an interview with FinTech TV. You mentioned that ultimately at scale, Todd, you feel as if you can get those charges kind of less than even 1% for the settlement. How do you kind of envision that as the product continues to grow?
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and it's difficult to get into the reads in the short period of time that we have, but to make it very simple, the more transportation companies that say, you know what, I want to crack the door to the TCS solution. I'm going to settle one invoice. I'm going to see if I like faster and cheaper settlement. Won't surprise any of you that all the carriers who have signed up on the platform have stuck around for faster and cheaper settlement. We don't have to bind them in a contract to do that, right? It's just faster, cheaper settlement kind of sells itself. But the more volume that we bring onto the exchange, the more it reduces the cost of capital, okay? And that has to do with what happens to the token after a transportation company sells it on an exchange. The important point to make in all of that is that reduction in cost of capital is not being placed on the backs of the transportation company or the brokerage, right? That operation subsidy is now happening on the backside of the transaction with secondary market participants who are speculating on the token, right? So just to put a kind of a fine point on it, the more volume, the more customers that come on, the more freight invoice settlement that we have moving on chain, TCS is going to be able to offer lower cost of capital to our transportation users. I personally, and I hope I can come back next year or maybe in 2 years and say that TCS is now offering transportation trade finance to trucking and logistics companies for free. I hope to be able to do that. At scale, we will be able to do that. We will literally be able to take the activity on the secondary market and use that to provide free invoice settlement to trucking and transportation companies. But to the point Mike made earlier, you all are going to decide that, right? You're going to be the decision makers in that process, and whether or not we can finally get rid of these usurious factoring contracts and these hard money loan rates that everybody's been dealing with.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
So in 2007, I knew a guy that bought the very first iPhone. And my response to that was, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Nobody needs a phone that will do all that. I got a Motorola Razr, and it's awesome. Okay? We can't be scared of disruptive technology, right? Larry Long, the guy that owned Blue Ribbon, was a professional photographer. He was the highest paid photographer in the state of Kentucky when he retired. When he saw the iPhone, he put a for sale sign on his photography business because he knew that wedding photography, as he knew it, was over. Because everybody had a 4 megapixel or whatever camera in their pocket. What can't happen is that owner-operators be disrupted. But if factory companies are disrupted, I'm not going to shed a single tear. But don't be scared of disruptive technology, because every innovation that we have today was because somebody threw a wrench in the works that you didn't see coming.
I got 30 seconds left, and with respect to everyone, my last question is going to go to Chris, because he's the one who's been out there in these trucks all these years doing the great North American routes. Chris, this uniquely and beautiful American pastime of trucking, what most excites you about helping bring that pastime into the future?
I am a freedom advocate before I'm anything, right? I want maximum human liberty for everybody, okay? And maximum human liberty comes in the form of self-education, self-employment, self-empowerment, but it's hard, okay? So my sales pitch to people is, hey man, come to Blue Ribbon. You're gonna work twice as hard for half the money, but when you get done, you're going to be able to achieve a level of freedom that most people can't even comprehend. So trucking to me is so exciting because it is such a mess, but yet profitable. It's the perfect proving ground for this technology for every industry. Think about what we could do for agriculture, because they're a mess too. There's so many of these industries all around us that provide everything that sustains our lives, and they're all plagued by capital and capital accessibility and the cost of capital and a devaluing currency. We have the best chance in all of human history to fix this and to move to a level of global human freedom that we've never seen before.
All right, one more hand here for our panelists. Outstanding conversation. Very grateful for all of your perspective. Thank you all so much for Look how nice the crowd filled out here. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your conference.